Tonight, heads roll at NAB. The chairman and chief executive both gone following damning criticism from the Banking Royal Commission. Also tonight, Townsville residents warned it could take years to rebuild their flood-damaged city. Fields of liquid gold. Could the territory be the next big thing in oil exploration? And in a league of their own, now it's the Tiwi Islands women hoping to make their mark on the national stage. Good evening, Tom Maddox with ABC News. The Banking and Financial Services Royal Commission has claimed its first scalps since the final report was handed down, with both the Chief Executive and Chairman of NAB resigning this afternoon. The bank was placed in a trading halt before the announcement was made. That came after the stock market closed.
Bullets fired by the Banking Royal Commission hit their targets late this afternoon. Both NAB's CEO Andrew Thorburn and his chairman Ken Henry gone.
I think it's important wherever behaviour is inappropriate that the institution employing those people sends a strong signal to their customers and to their staff that it's inappropriate.
The writing was on the wall when Andrew Thorburn sat down with the ABC's The Business on Tuesday.
Andrew Thorburn, can you guarantee that you will be CEO by the end of the week?
No, I can't guarantee that, Elise.
Andrew Thorburn says he's not bitter about his sacking, just sad.
I was up for the ongoing commitment. I made that very clear, but I recognised the board's desire for change and I offered to step down to help that process. The board accepted that.
Chairman Ken Henry was remorseful.
I've had to reflect in recent times overwhelmingly on our inability as a company to meet community expectations and customer expectations in the manner that we would aspire to. Andrew and I are deeply sorry for our inability to do that.
NAB's been reeling since it was singled out for bad behaviour in the final report of the Royal Commission released on Monday. Andrew Thorburn treated all issues of fees for no service as nothing more than carelessness, the Commissioner said, and Ken Henry seemed unwilling to accept any criticism of how the board had dealt with some issues.
Anyone who watched their performance at the Royal Commission could not have been impressed with the way they responded to the questions and the acceptance of what the problems were, or lack of acceptance as to what the problems were.
The former head of ANZ's Australian Bank, Phil Chronican, will take the poison chalice of acting NAB CEO when Andrew Thorburn leaves at the end of the month. Ken Henry will stay on to oversee the appointment of a permanent chief executive. Other NAB directors are also heading for the door. Andrew Robertson, ABC News.
Authorities are warning it could take years to rebuild flood-ravaged Townsville. The extensive damage is now becoming clear. 1,500 homes have been assessed, 250 of them are completely uninhabitable, 700 severely damaged, and more than $100 million in insurance claims have been lodged. That's expected to rise. Josh Bavis takes a look at a city struggling to get back on its feet.
In a city desperate to dry out, rain is the last thing it needs.
I've been knee-deep inside the house and next door neighbour Z is worse off than me.
They're tired of the stench and trying to clean up.
Well, our mattresses are wet, but we've got to sleep on them because there's nowhere else to sleep.
Cheryl Whiting is working to save precious photos. Her house repairs could take months.
Someone told me this morning that you'll never have your same dream house that you had. Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Yeah, pretty sad.
Morning, sir. My name's Mick from the fire service.
Door to door, authorities are assessing the damage.
This gentleman has over 350 mil through the living and sleeping areas, so this place is uninhabitable.
About 250 homes are unsafe to live in, more than 700 severely damaged.
What do? Throw it out and start again.
Teresa Gibson is one of about 200 people staying in an evacuation centre. Teresa, you've got all your family here. How is everyone?
Oh, they're upset too. They want to go back home and they can't.
The question is, where will they go?
Our priority is to get people into safe places.
Orange Sky Laundry is lending a hand.
The moisture is just disgusting up here, but
these dries are pretty good.
And the Salvos have launched a nationwide appeal as they churn out meals to feed those in need. Even a local pineapple grower is giving away his fruit.
Oh, this is awesome. It's really, really, really good of them.
But among the acts of kindness, fury aimed at those who stole diesel from a council's sewerage treatment plant.
These people are just scum. They are scum. You know, we don't tolerate burglaries in the city.
At the peak of the flood, the water level would have been about up to my waist in this suburb. It's 4 days on and it hasn't drained away. It's still raining. The Weather Bureau says conditions should start to clear tomorrow. Josh Bavis, ABC News, Townsville.
British meteorologists are predicting the next 5 years will be much hotter, maybe even record-breaking across the globe. And worryingly, research from international weather organisations suggests that the 1.5 degree temperature rise figure may be reached sooner than expected. Michael Vincent reports.
Another year, another record heat wave.
It's been hot. The last 5 years have been the record warmest years that we've seen in a record that goes back to the 19th century and possibly even hundreds of years before that.
The number of extreme weather events has been growing. Meteorologists from the US, Europe and the UK have been monitoring the planet's temperatures and have come to the same disturbing conclusion. The numbers are only going in one direction, up.
You know, it's certainly worrying to see the long-term changes that we are seeing and, you know, we expect to see for decades to come.
This is worrying because this is a new level of temperature extreme and the regional impacts of that are likely to be unprecedented.
The British Bureau of Meteorology looked at its past 50 years of predictions. Then it compared actual temperatures, almost a perfect match. The past 4 years have been the hottest on record. Some of the next 5 years could hit and temporarily go above 1.5 degrees, one of the limits in the Paris Climate Agreement.
It's possible that an individual year could go above 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial. We're still some way away from going above that number on a sustained basis.
This summer is already breaking records.
December was the hottest December on record, and then January was the hottest month on record for Australia by nearly a degree, and it's almost certain that Australia will have its hottest summer on record. The only question really is by how much.
We've got to reduce our emissions of greenhouse gases. We've got to reduce the concentrations, because if we don't, we are looking at really big changes in the climate. We're going into territory that we have never been in before.
Scientists have long said temperatures at these sustained high levels will put some of Australia's natural wonders at risk. Michael Vincent, ABC News.
The Melbourne-based refugee stuck in a Thai jail says he's devastated by the news. He could be locked up for months while authorities decide whether he should be extradited to Bahrain. Southeast Asia correspondent Anne Barker visited Hakeem Al Arabi today. She joins us now. Anne, how is the young soccer star holding up?
Tom, I'd have to say I don't believe he's holding up very well at all. He's clearly struggling with imprisonment here in Bangkok. His overriding emotion, I would say, was despair, and his main message was to reiterate the fact that he sees himself as innocent. He believes he's been wrongly targeted by the Bahraini authorities. He lives in terror of being extradited to Bahrain, where he could be imprisoned for 10 years, tortured or even killed. Now, he was absolutely devastated to learn that he could actually be in jail here for another 6 months, far longer than the original 2 months that he thought it would be until he faced the court here again in April. The Thai authorities revealed yesterday that it could be as long as August before the court makes a decision on his defence and the extradition request from Bahrain. And he is obviously very desperate to get home to his wife in Melbourne and to see and speak to his family again. And he is absolutely terrified at the prospect that he will never return to Australia.
And Thailand didn't take kindly to Scott Morrison's intervention yesterday. Is there any sign it'll soften its stance?
Not at all, Tom. I think it was on the contrary. The Thai authorities called a briefing today. One of the main reasons for that, I gather, was to reiterate to Australia that they will not interfere with this court case until the judges make a decision. Once the extradition proceedings are in train, they cannot interfere, and they won't. They also have blamed Australia again for the red notice that led to Hakeem Al Arabi's arrest, saying that it was Australia that alerted the authorities and that Interpol red notice, even if it was illegal, it was Australia that issued it. They also have said today that the Australians didn't even tell Thailand until the 6th of December that Hakeem Al Arabi was a refugee. They say that was a full week after he'd been arrested, taken off the plane in Bangkok. And they have also said, very worryingly, that it's almost unheard of for an extradition request in Bangkok not to be granted. In other words, almost all people like Hakeem Al Arabi who face extradition proceedings of this kind, the vast majority, if not all of them, do end up being extradited. Now, they are very strong words, but they do show that Thailand is not buckling under any pressure from Australia or any other body or country.
Anne Barker in Bangkok, thanks for your time. The Federal Resources Minister has declared the Northern Territory's Beetaloo Basin to be Australia's best current prospect for finding a new oil source. Companies which have discovered gas in the area south of Katherine have told investors they also plan to explore for liquids this dry season. It's prompted green groups to ask the Territory government why fracking for oil was not risk assessed.
Gas companies including Origin Energy and Falcon Oil are already planning to frack for gas in the Beetaloo Basin south of Katherine. The federal minister is welcoming their intention to now also target oil.
There is a lot of people excited about the potential for liquid production in the shale fields of the Beetaloo Basin.
He's hopeful the Beetaloo could produce enough oil to replace domestic production in the Bass Strait.
The best immediate prospect we have across all of the onshore and offshore areas is here in the Beetaloo Basin, and that certainly could help us return to an era of self-sustainability in oil, which is very important for our national security.
The Territory government has known about the Beetaloo Basin's oil potential for decades, so green groups are asking why its fracking inquiry was only asked to risk assess gas.
The concern is that there now exists plans to frack for shale oil in the Beetaloo Basin, and those plans have managed to dodge any scrutiny by the NT community and the scientific experts.
The minister doesn't know why oil wasn't included in the inquiry.
As for the exact detail of that, I'll have to get a brief around exactly what people are exploring for.
The industry body is confident the new gas regulations will also serve to protect the environment against damage by oil production.
There are no risks associated with producing either oil or some of these liquid forms of gas that differ from the production of dry gas.
What the inquiry found is that all its recommendations are as applicable to gas as they are to oil, and so those risks have been mitigated by the report and what we're doing as a government to implement that report.
The fracking inquiry said it didn't investigate oil because the government didn't include it in the terms of reference. It said its conclusion that the risks of fracking for oil could be mitigated along with those for gas was based on just a small percentage of liquid being produced. Jane Bardon, ABC News.
Communities and survivors of Black Saturday are tonight marking 10 years since the tragic event, which would go on to become one of Australia's worst disasters in recorded history. In record-breaking heatwave conditions, 173 people were killed and more than 400 were injured as multiple unstoppable fires burned through nearly 500,000 hectares across Victoria. A Royal Commission took a hard look at what went wrong on that day, which found multiple failures, but perhaps the most significant was the failure to get information to people who had no idea they were in the path of a catastrophic fire. Ben Knight reports.
When the town of Strathewen began rebuilding after Black Saturday, one of the first construction projects was this memorial. Tonight, it'll be the site of some unfinished business.
We'd never thanked our community people who had led and contributed to our own recovery, and that this was the time to do it, and if we missed this, that would probably never be done.
But for some who lived through it, the approach of this anniversary has also caused anxiety.
This week will be particularly hard for me and others that were involved in it. I mean, there was 173 people that lost their lives. We have some ownership in that. Our job is to save lives and property, and our people don't like me saying this, but there was a sense from our point of view that we let people down. So it was a really, really an emotional time.
A third of the people killed on Black Saturday had no idea the fire was coming. Much has changed since then. The most visible is the Vic Emergency app, which has now clocked up 1.2 million downloads.
There wouldn't be many locals that wouldn't have access to that app and wouldn't use it on a daily basis at this time of the year.
The messages it sends have also changed. This week, when fire threatened the Victorian town of Hepburn Springs, residents were bluntly told that if they didn't evacuate, emergency services may not be able to help them.
People need to understand, don't expect a fire truck, don't expect an aeroplane. Yes, we might get there, but by and large, we don't.
10 years on, lives have been pieced back together. Forests have regrown. Destroyed towns, like Marysville, have largely been rebuilt.
School is back, the police station back, the church is back, and the pub is back. So that's really the town. It's town completing now.
Tonight in Strathewen, they're gathering to remember Black Saturday, but also to put it into the past.
I realise that I no longer want to be defined by the fire event. I want to be a normal person. I want to have my life back.
Remembrance and renewal. Ben Knight, ABC News.
Still to come this hour, out of the ashes, Heather Hewitt revisits survivors of the Black Saturday tragedy.
So good to see ya.
I don't want to fail again.
You didn't fail anything. What do you think you failed?
I evacuated a truck when I should have been evacuating neighbours, and they died.
That's coming up.
Western Australia's coroner has described the deaths of 13 young Indigenous people in the state's Kimberley region, some as young as 10, as a tragic intergenerational trauma. In one of the state's largest and most complex cases, Coroner Ros Fogliani examined why the region has one of the highest youth suicide rates in the world.
Across the Kimberley region, people filed into courtrooms, seeking answers and hoping for solutions after the suicides of their youngest community members. Over a 3.5-year period, 13 people under the age of 24 took their own lives. 5 were between 10 and 13 years old. Coroner Ros Fogliani launched an inquest in 2017, travelling to several Kimberley communities. In handing down her 373-page report, Ms Fogliani said the situation in the Kimberley region is dire. Young people have continued to die by suicide despite increased government funding. Coroner Ros Fogliani said all of the children and young persons had at some point lived in home environments that were marred by alcohol abuse, and this had had a severe and cascading effect on their lives. Of the 42 recommendations made by the coroner, the first 6 relate to fetal alcohol syndrome disorder, including universal screening. She also recommends alcohol restrictions across the entire Kimberley and drug and alcohol rehab centres for children. Suicide prevention worker Rob McPhee travelled from Broome to Perth to see the findings handed down.
You mentioned there's a lot of mainstream services that are trying to impose a particular model on the needs of the community, and what we really need to do is work with community to understand what are the needs.
Indigenous rights campaigner June Oscar was there for the other major Aboriginal suicide inquest a decade ago. She says the root causes still exist.
It absolutely is a national crisis, and it does require immediate attention from all governments.
I thought there was recognition of all the issues that contribute to Indigenous suicide.
The Federal Indigenous Health Minister, Ken Wyatt, said he'd consider a recommendation to include fetal alcohol syndrome disorder within the NDIS. Katherine Diss, ABC News.
And if you have any concerns, you can ring Lifeline on 1311 14. Researchers looking at data from 5 Arnhem Land communities have found 95% of children were prescribed antibiotics in their first year of life. The study looked at the medical records of about 400 children in remote Aboriginal communities between 2001 and 2007. They found childhood ear, skin and respiratory infections occurred a lot and required antibiotics. The concern is heavy antibiotic use can lead to drug resistance. Drug-resistant golden staph is already occurring in Aboriginal communities in higher rates than the wider population.
About 10 to 15% around Australia, but in many Aboriginal communities it's up around 50 or 60% now. So that's a really marked difference, and it makes treating these infections that much harder.
Researchers believe improved housing and hygiene could curb antibiotic use by almost 20%. The Northern Territory Government has fast-tracked plans to build a replacement jetty at Mandorah on Darwin Harbour. The new $50 million facility is one of 5 previously announced projects worth $125 million that will get underway earlier than planned. It comes as the opposition criticised the government for spending $50,000 to advertise its budget plans.
Built in the 1960s, the Mandorah jetty has weathered the worst of the top end's wild weather. And despite several $1 million worth of repairs over the years, at times it's been held together with plastic zip ties, prompting protests from local residents about safety and accessibility.
It's not fair on the little kids. What's it going to take for one of them to be injured or fall into the water?
The Territory Government previously promised a $24 million replacement at some point over the next decade. But that's now been fast-tracked to within 3 years, albeit at a cost of $50 million.
Original estimates were really a real lowball. The longer they've had to work on it, the better they've got their costings.
Walgate Beach residents say the new jetty can't come soon enough.
We're all hoping the current jetty and the zip ties that hold it together and some of the rust hold out for the extra another 3 years.
The other fast-track projects include a new fire station for Palmerston, Stage 2 of the Zicoli Primary School, additional lots at the Kilgariff housing development, as well as an upgrade of roads in Litchfield National Park, a project originally slated for 2017-18, then delayed till late 2019 and now brought forward again.
To make sure that we have that pipeline, those large projects out there supporting enterprise.
The Chief Minister insists the timetable time warp won't affect the budget bottom line.
Again, we're seeing announcements around expenditure, but we have not seen one announcement around concrete savings.
The fast-tracking comes as Darwin CBD continues to feel the brunt of the Territory's economic downturn, with almost 1/5 of office space still vacant.
We know that we still have issues in the CBD with our vacant stock, so we really need to work on fixing that and getting that back under control.
The government's trying to get its message back under control with newspaper and television ads about its budget plans at a cost of $50,000.
We want them to know that if they wish to contribute to the debate around the fiscal situation, they can.
If you can get advertising and PR and spin out there, why can't you get some savings out there?
A question likely to be asked when Parliament resumes next week. Jono Gibson, ABC News.
Bank shares rose to their highest level for 4 months today, pushing the local share market to its 4th gain in a row. Here's Alan Kohler.
As it happens, NAB has been the worst performing of the major banks on the ASX over the past 3 months, but there's not much in it. And that's not the reason for the leadership changes anyway. The Royal Commission's path is littered with executive roadkill. NAB also went up the least today ahead of going into a trading halt, but they all went up quite a bit. And that was the main reason the All Ordinaries rose more than 1%. Perhaps the biggest irony is that today's best performing bank was the ASX-listed London-based bank called CYBG, which consists of the 2 British banks that NAB got rid of 2 years ago, Clydesdale and Yorkshire Banks. Mind you, it fell nearly 50% in the last quarter of last year. Other gains today included AMP, CSL and the mining companies. The Australian dollar has dipped below 71 US cents as the market continues to adjust to yesterday's speech by Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe that the next move in interest rates is now a 50-50 bet between hike and cut. But look at this chart of the exchange rate over the past 5 days. All that happened was its steady decline was briefly interrupted by what we might call Lowe's plateau. On Tuesday, the tightening bias was retained, so it went up, and on Wednesday it was dumped, so normal transition was resumed. Global markets generally moved lower and nothing happened on commodity markets worth mentioning, except for these commodities. Meat. Since 1990, according to the OECD, global consumption of pork and beef has remained the same, but chicken consumption has increased 70%. Why? Well, because the price has fallen the most, in turn because selective breeding has made them bigger and more cost-effective. And that's finance.
In the AFL, the Hawks have flown into Darwin to launch a special partnership to improve Indigenous health. Territorians who attend the clinic will get one of these specially made Hawthorn shirts. The Hawks have joined up with Deadly Choices, an Australia-wide initiative that urges Indigenous people to get regular health checks.
You obviously get this magnificent Guernsey, so we're very excited to be a part of it and live a very healthy lifestyle, just like the athletes that we have at the Hawthorn Football Club.
The players toured the Danila Dilba clinic to prove everyone needs a checkup. Rioli, Long, Wanamiri, just three of the famous footy names from the footballing hotbed that is the Tiwi Islands. But two young women from the area are the newest footy players from the Tiwis making waves, hoping to add to the island's tradition of producing great players. Elias Kluwer reports.
The Tiwi Islands Grand Final. Players from Bathurst and Melville showing off what made the Tiwis famous, scintillating pace and dazzling skill. And two young women are now continuing the tradition.
Good on you, that's good. You excited?
Yep. Jess Darcy and Frida Purantanamiri hail from the tiny Tiwi community of Milakarpiti, but have recently returned from Melbourne, where they have made a lasting impression.
To actually get a phone call saying you've got into the VFL side is amazed.
It was awesome and I was pretty excited.
After 2 days training at Windy Hill, the pair were snapped up by Essendon's VFLW team and will join them in April.
So I've been playing footy ever since I was small, right up till now, so I've come a long way.
The girls have their sights set on AFLW, with Essendon pushing to have a team within the next 2 seasons. Footy pundits say they're both likely to make the big league.
Fingers crossed for next year when the Bombers team actually come into the AFL, and hopefully we'll get a chance to witness something in there and hopefully play in the AFLW. So, yeah, we're pretty keen.
The pair aren't shy about sharing their big dreams.
To be the best?
Yeah.
Daniel and Willie Rioli, Anthony Tippenwoody, that's just a few of the names from the Tiwi Islands taking the footy world by storm. And these guys think it's time to add a few women's names to the list. Oh!
The men's are pretty much doing all of it, so it's pretty awesome to see females from the Tiwi Islands to actually go out there and dominate and just show what the ladies got.
Breaking down barriers with a Sharon in hand. Elias Kluwer, ABC News, Darwin.
Now to the weather, and Vlad Brahoza sent in tonight's viewer photo. Very isolated showers and storms over the top end today. It was 33 degrees in Darwin today, 34 in Bachelor. 36 today in Katherine, 34 in Nhulunbuy and Borroloola 39. Alice Springs, Uluru and Tennant Creek hit 41. Rabbit Flat 44 degrees. Nyawilli or Elcho Island topped the rain chart with 23 millimetres. Perlin-Gympie on the Tiwi Islands also got a bit of rain. Around Australia today, Brisbane and Canberra 31, Sydney 29, Adelaide 32 and Perth 36. On the satellite, not much activity over the territory, but there's lots of cloud over Queensland associated with the tropical lows and monsoon trough. A trough extends from WA across northern Australia to 2 tropical lows moving east into the Coral Sea. Interstate tomorrow, a few showers in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, partly cloudy for Adelaide. To our north, rain in Port Moresby and Dili, storms in Singapore, 32 degrees in Bali. Around the territory tomorrow, sunny and 37 in Alice Springs and Uluru, Tennant Creek and Elliot 42. Further north, storms and 36 in Katherine, sunny and 41 in Borroloola, wind easing and a top of 35 in Nhulunbuy. In the west, possible storms and 35 in Jabiru. It should be 33 degrees in Darwin. There's a strong wind warning for the Arafura and Gove Peninsula coastlines. The evening high tide will be at about 8:45. Sunrise tomorrow will be at 6:42 and will set at 7:19. Looking ahead, a warm night tonight expected in Darwin. The chance of a storm improving slightly over the weekend. In Alice Springs, a slightly cooler change will see temperatures decrease to the mid-30s. Stay with us now. Lee Sales is up next with 7:30.